I just wanted to give you a little bit of background because within the women's game, player care really just refers to all those elements of psychosocial support that goes towards supporting players off the pitch. And so that helps to create a bit of a platform for them really so they can thrive and that they can develop as not only footballers but also as people. So this is a really, really important area for us across the pro game within the FA. And as a result of that, we're about to appoint a player care lead for the women's pro game. We're about to appoint a performance lifestyle lead who will work within England teams. And they'll have a range of responsibilities really, but primarily sort of driving forward very much a player-first approach. And so we're really very eager to make sure we've got a situation where players are at the very centre of decision making and that we're aiming to sort of prioritise as a baseline to any decision their well-being and their health. And it's critical that by driving that forward, we kind of get a sense that we're likely to keep them in the game that much longer. And we're also very conscious of the fact that if we can deal with the off-pitch challenges that players might face, we very much improve the opportunity for them to perform on the pitch. Female health and the female athlete is absolutely at the forefront of the work that we do, and we recognise that where we investigate and where we understand better the female athlete, we're in a position where we can support the clubs to develop their understanding and enhance their training environments. And fundamentally, if we can create a situation where individual players can improve their performance, then as a rising tide raises all ships, we can improve the quality of on-pitch performances. We can attract more spectators to our game, and we can retain those who are already interested. We also have a bit of an obligation, or certainly a strong obligation, to maintain the integrity of our sport, and it's putting care of players at the forefront of our thoughts is absolutely the right thing to do. We'll have players who get support within the club space, and we'll have players who will get support within the England space. And so we've got to ensure that there's real kind of continuity there in terms of the level of care and support that they receive. So those individuals coming into work to operate and support this space are going to primarily be driving this area forward. When I came into the role that I'm doing now, mid-early part of last year, I was really interested to get a sense of what was going on within the performance support space, what projects were being undertaken, what workflows were currently underway, and I asked a lot of questions and I spent time listening. And I had a number of examples of fairly disconnected workflows and projects, but that were consistently providing feedback about the priority and the perceived need for time, energy, investment in supporting the development of player care within domestic football. So we looked much more closely at what that meant, and there was a real level of diverse support taking place across the clubs. There was diversity in the understanding of what player care meant. There certainly wasn't consistency in that space. There was a range of different disciplines operating under the umbrella term of player care. There was kind of a lack of clarity about who was responsible for what, but one thing that we were really clear about is that clubs recognised the importance of care for players. They recognised that they needed help and support. There was consideration that they didn't want it to be necessarily what it was within the men's game, greater or lesser degree a concierge service. That's probably doing it a bit of a disservice, but there was a sense that it needed to be something different and unique for our game. So we wanted to try and bring a little bit of clarity to what was going on within this space. We wanted to define terms. We wanted to try and better understand how players and clubs could be supported to develop this area. And so whilst there is almost certainly a need for player liaison, the women's game is a dual career sport. There'll be a limited time frame in which they're able to play. We have to be considerate of of players' transition out of the game beyond their short tenure within it. We have to be considerate of the fact that we need to create opportunities to ensure that they can develop both professionally in terms of their education, but we also have to make sure that we put their health and well-being at the forefront, and as a consequence of that, really investigate opportunities to explore what expert support we might be able to receive in this space. So if we are going to work with clubs to ensure that they have an effective interdisciplinary team to provide this holistic support for players, if we are going to engage with their player care teams, and if we are going to create a situation where we are well connected to external experts in order to really drive this area forward, we have to engage with the right people. We've got Emma Ross here from the Well HQ. She's done a significant piece of work with us in and around the area of female athlete health. So I'll pass you over to Emma. She can tell you much more about that.
You. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Emma. I have the most rubbish slot of the day because you've just had lunch and you're probably feeling a little bit sleepy, so I'm going to try and keep you entertained for the next 45 minutes or so. As Andy said, I have been working with the FA to really try and understand how we're supporting females across the women's game. So my background is I was the head of physiology at the English Institute of Sport for about 10 years. And in my tenure there, I started asking what were probably quite annoying questions, which were, do we world's best female athletes as well as we support our male athletes? And here we were in one of the world's best high performance system with some of the world's best female athletes. And I was bugging people and saying, yeah, but do we really think we've created a system here in sport that is optimised for people who are the shape of women and not and the answer was no, we hadn't. And I spent about 6 years talking to and learning from coaches and athletes and sports science practitioners about what assumptions we've made in terms of supporting and training women, and educating them about the things that I thought we were overlooking in sport, to do with being female. Because we were really good at training athletes, we just weren't necessarily really good at understanding the female body and using that information and integrating that into our preparation of those people for elite performance. And I saw way too many female athletes who, there's a brilliant quote from a guy called James Clear, and it goes, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And what that means is if you're operating in a system that doesn't nurture and support you in the way that you need, doesn't matter how audacious your goals are and how capable you are of reaching them, you just won't get there. And I worked in a system that looked like that, and I saw way too many female athletes who got to Olympic Games, and the thing that stopped them was debilitating period pain. And I was like, we have not trained this person, and this person has not sweated and toiled for 4 years, and we haven't invested millions in the design of her skin suit and all of her equipment and the training to get to the Olympics and go, oh, that's a shame, that's that time of the month. It's like, this is bonkers. So that was kind of my mission, to sort of redesign a system to make it work better for the women that were in it. And in 2020, we meant to be ahead of the Tokyo Games, that kind of delayed in the end, but I stepped out of that role because I wanted to broaden the reach of this work. Because as you can imagine, I was working in elite sport, Olympic and Paralympic sport, which is amazing, but there are so many other sports and so many other girls and women across the pathway who were like, yeah, we don't understand that either. So many coaches who were working with girls and women who could see girls and women who were dropping out of sport or they weren't getting the best out of them, and they wanted to know more about this stuff too. So we founded The Well, And as one of our first gigs, actually, we worked with the FA on what we call the State of Play project. And the State of Play project was designed to really understand what was going on in the women's game in terms of supporting women's health and really understanding women's bodies in football. And it was a joy to be asked to do that, not just because it was my passion, but also because it meant that the FA had taken an insight-driven approach to creating a strategy. It would be really easy for them to say, can someone who knows about this stuff come in and tell us what we're meant to be doing here? And then we'll just tell everyone what you're meant to be doing without actually understanding what the landscape looked like. What was the players' experience of being a woman in football and having to understand their bodies, having to kind of go through all of the things that we go through as females, whether that's having periods, whether that's pelvic floor issues, whether that's finding a sports bra, whether that's our relationships with food, whatever it is that has a sort of female perspective. We wanted to understand what that looked like in football and then use that insight to help everyone in the game develop a strategy that could have real impact. So we had a two-prong approach. We sent out a survey. It was a really comprehensive survey that was asking players about their experience of being female. So it was asking them about their experience of their menstrual cycles. It was asking them about how confident they would be to talk about their periods or their cycles with their coach or their physio. We were asking coaches and sports science practitioners about how comfortable they were talking about this stuff. Did they even know about these topics? Had they been taught them? Where were they getting their information from? And so we explored all sorts of information around women's health. And then we also dived deeper into focus groups. So we wanted to bring some of this data to life. So the survey gave us some really good stats. We wanted to hear the stories, soul of that data, the experiences of the players and the coaches. And we had focus groups where the players were super honest and open and vulnerable about their experience in the game. And player coaches and general managers and kit people were the same. And we had them as separate groups to allow them to really feel like they were in a safe space. And I really, really enjoyed talking to the players across the game and finding out what their experiences were like. And so we then compiled the State of Play project report, which Andy has been distributing across the game, Andy's little guy, kind of at different levels. And now I think we've socialised it pretty much as widely as we can. But if you would like to see a copy of the report, Andy's little guy. And we presented back findings, which I'm going to show you today to give you some insight into what we found. But we also then provided some recommendations. So that's what we're going to show you this afternoon. So to be more specific about the type of things that we were trying to understand, and we think these things are really important and fundamental and sort of non-negotiable when we're coaching female athletes. And we're all in the business of performance. That's ultimately what we need from our players. But we don't get performance if we don't have healthy, happy athletes. And I firmly believe that. And I worked in a system which often was quite challenging because some of the times the tagline was no compromise. And sometimes the ethos was, if you are happy, you're comfortable. And you have to be relentlessly restless and uncomfortable to pursue peak performance. And I was like, could we be compassionate, happy and caring and pursue peak performance? And it's a great discussion to have. I firmly believe we can. Because to be able to deal with some of this stuff, we have to be compassionate. We have to allow women's experiences of their bodies and of being in sports to be valid, whatever they are. And that requires us to be vulnerable and caring. And I do think that underpins players' ability to then feel like they belong in a sport and go off and be the best version of themselves. There's also a huge duty of care here. So when we get some of these things wrong, and I'm going to show you some of the things that we might be getting wrong, we break people. And we break them so that it affects them for the rest of their lives. And I'm not saying we as a group here, I'm saying as in sport. And again, we've got way too many examples. And they don't need young athletes who have underfueled. No one says to them, that's not right. They're on a quest to be light and fit and lean, and they don't eat enough. And then their body starts breaking down and their periods stop. and no one says to them, that's not right. And then they go on, and the spiral of underfueling continues until they have osteoporosis when they're 21 years old. So there is a huge duty of care issue here to make sure we look after people in this game. And people will arrive to this game and they won't be superstar athletes who know exactly what to eat and who know exactly how to train and exactly when to rest, and they will need support. And that really plays into the philosophy of player care. So the report kind of set out the findings, and the report also has some infographics on. So again, it's a nice summary of information if you're interested in getting a copy of that. So one of the big topics we explored was the menstrual cycle. Now, the menstrual cycle has had its share of headlines in football, not least, probably starting with the US soccer team, who apparently won. They did track their periods, and I'm sure understanding their bodies was a real advantage to them. But I can tell you now, tracking your periods alone does not help you win a World Cup. Using that data in a really impactful way will go a long way to helping you improve performance. But I can guarantee you now that there are very few people doing that. So just because we have headlines like this doesn't mean to say, actually, we've ticked the menstrual cycle. People know how to do that. But we don't. We're not doing it particularly well still across the whole of sport, even though we do like to shout about it a lot. Increasing narrative around things like injury in the menstrual cycle. We have to be really careful about urban myths start to be created around things like injury, because it is the thing that gets into players' heads, because injury is the thing that's going to stop them being who they want to be, a professional footballer, for as long as they can be. And when you start telling them, oh, if you're in your period, you might get injured, or if you're ovulating, you might get injured, and then they're on a pitch going, oh God, I might get injured. We spoke to lots of players who it plays on their mind. There is some evidence that hormones and injury are related, but there is absolutely no evidence with women's health about how important their hormones are at the moment. Research is ongoing. And what we find is that some of these narratives are perpetuated, because with women's health in particular, there has been a rising tide of sort of awareness. We've all seen periods in sports bras in the news across sport. And when you get a rising tide of awareness, you get expectation that, oh, so what do we do about this? Well, where are the answers? You get expectation that, oh, so what do we do about this? And they take a while to come, because we haven't done very well in this area for a long time. So whilst everyone's waiting for the solutions and the guidance and the best practice, people start to create a narrative or stories or products that fill that gap. And sometimes it's just bullshit, and sometimes it's nearly right but not quite. And we have to be really careful when we navigate that space. But the menstrual cycle is an amazing physiological rhythm in a woman's body, and it will affect how we feel. It will affect how coordinated we might be on any given day. It will affect how emotional we are, how we connect with our teammates, how we might go about taking risks and stepping outside of our comfort zone, how resilient we are. These hormones are amazing. And so we are really interested in how players experience their cycle and whether it gets in the way of their football and whether they know what to do about that. So when we did the survey, we found that lots of the players are experiencing symptoms of the menstrual cycle. And for those who do, the majority of them say it impacts how they train or play. The number of days lost to injury and illness in athletes. When I worked at the English Institute of Sport, we spent millions of pounds creating an athlete health team, and their one job was to reduce the number of days lost to injury and illness in athletes. Because we knew that if we could get athletes to do the exact things they were meant to do on any given day, and not do less quality, less volume, or no training at all because they were ill or injured, then we would increase our chances of success by more than any making round the wheel stuff could ever do. But we were ignoring stuff like this, which is a huge percentage of the 86% of women, I can't do that maths, who have symptoms. The quality of their training is impacted. That's huge. 63% of the players are tracking their cycle, so that's probably quite normal. But 82% of those don't share their data with anyone in their sport. So there's a real lack of confidence about sharing it. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to use it? I'm worried that you're going to use it against me and not with me. Imagine you say, I actually do have debilitating period pain, and coach goes, oh, geez, yeah, we've got that big game on Saturday. Perhaps you should sit on the bench. All of this stuff requires us to create an environment where players trust that we're going to use this information in the right way, which isn't, I'm going to bench you. It's, how do we make sure that that period pain doesn't get in the way of you showing up on Saturday and giving it your all? And if we don't understand how to do that right now, let's start working on it. Because I can guarantee if a player had a knee injury and came and said, oh, coach, it's still not going away, keeps flaring up, we'd be talking to physios and chiropractors and acupuncturists and potions and lotions and pills and strapping and taping until we got the solution. And so we need to kind of get to that place with the menstrual cycle. And lots of the girls didn't know much about their cycle in terms of how it influenced sport and whether it did affect injury, whether it did affect speed. They had all these questions that they didn't feel like they could have answered by the people around them. And that's because staff knowledge was also low. And that's no surprise, by the way. No one's kind of been skiving off football coaches or whatever you go to. We don't integrate this information into any qualifications, but science degrees, physio degrees, coaching qualifications. And we are actually working with SIMSPA, who are the sort of body who governs training and qualifications in sport, to create. We are actually working so that we can start integrating this education into any qualification we want. We also asked the players and the coaches about nutrition. Nutrition is, as I said, really important, not just because we know it's the foundation of athletes performing well and staying healthy, but also because if we get it wrong, particularly in girls, there's a likelihood that they could go down a particular pathway which leads to illness and injury and ultimately career-ending situation. And we know that in girls and women, our relationships with food are different than they are in boys and men, because of, you name one of the many on the list, but this idea of, a beauty standard or the drive to be smaller and leaner because it's considered attractive, we get shown on social media, whatever it is. We know that the prevalence of eating disorders is greater in women and girls, and we have different relationships with food. We're much more likely to diet, we're much more likely not to eat carbs, we're much more likely to skip meals, etc. And when we get in the women's game, it's really important that we don't only teach them how to eat like athletes, we also much more like they've got this sort of female mindset around food. And when we get the balance wrong, when we don't eat and fuel well enough to meet the demands of our training, our life, and for a lot of these girls and women, their jobs, because some of them are semi-pro, they're studying, they're working. When that balance is wrong, all sorts of things go wrong. And just to give you an idea about how the body starts to break down when we chronically underfuel, it affects all parts of us. We're 70% more likely to have depression if we're underfueling chronically. We are, I think, like 60% more likely to have bone injury. We are much more likely to have immune function disruption, gastrointestinal issues. So nutrition is important. And on that backdrop, some of the messages we were getting out of the women's game at the moment was, we just don't know enough. Again, we don't get enough education. Nutritional education will be the first thing that's taught the players about. The logistics of eating well. It's not just about the fact that I know I should be eating well, it's how the heck do I do that? I've been working and then I go to training and then I get home and it's late and I don't feel hungry and now I don't really know what to do. Lots of players not eating before they before they play matches, they're nervous. No one's helping them really get to the bottom of how they can do that well. And 30% of the players across WC and WSL don't even have nutritional support, which at that level, playing and training at that level, that's really, really important. And 20% of the players that we surveyed had missed their period for 3 months, and that's really a really big warning sign that they haven't been getting their fueling right. So the physiology of that is, in a woman's body, it doesn't have enough energy, it needs to switch something off. Can't switch off our brain. Our brain is really energy consuming, but we die. We can't switch off our muscles or our heart or our lungs or our immune function because we die. But we can, in a female body, switch off our reproductive system. And you don't have periods, and you don't have to produce all those hormones, it takes loads of energy. Brilliant. when I go into school, some of the girls are there are like, oh, this does sound quite good actually. No periods, no hormones. But the consequences are what I've just shown to you, that once you suppress the reproductive system, you suppress the amazing hormones that help us grow, develop, repair, be immune, have good brain health, and then all of those things start to break down. But we've got players who are in that situation. Only about a third of clubs had any policies related to when that happens. So we've got players who might be in that situation, and if they did know enough to recognise they were, and then share that with a coach or a sports scientist, that's where the process ended. There wasn't any signposting to specialists or referral pathways which would allow them to get the right help. Lots of girls asking about why body composition is so important in a game where you can test performance really measurably, speed, power, agility. What does it matter what I weigh, what my body composition is? Because if I'm performing well, and that's a really good conversation to have in women's sports, because body composition testing can play havoc with people's eating behaviours. I'm slightly obsessed with sports bras. We did a big project a few years ago, working with these guys at the University of Portsmouth to understand breast movement in sport. Now, as a female, I know that it's uncomfortable to have your breasts when they're not supported well enough and you're trying to run around. I know that can be painful. I know that my daughter, when we're out for a walk with the dog and she starts running off, she's like, know this information on a daily basis. She knows that if I have, I can take it, I can run with her, and if I don't, I can't. And now my estate just, know this information on a daily basis. But not just comfort and pain and everything else, but also performance. So if you're wearing poor breast support, that happens to your body that impacts your performance. So the first thing that happens is your body position changes because you've got a mass on the front of your body that's moving slightly. So your body leans forward. Now you're in a less economical running position. It means you use more energy. Your stride length shortens ground with each stride. Exercise feels harder, so your stride length is greater. So if I walked into any club today and I said, do you know what I could do for all your players? Is I could make exercise feel easier. I could make them cover more ground in a game, and I could make it less fatiguing. I bet all the coaches would be like, sign me up. It's a bra. It's a well-fitting sports bra. A lot of the coaches are meant, so they wouldn't be signing themselves up, but they would sign their players up. So when we asked the players about their behaviours around bras, 82% never had help, and we don't get born with the ability to know how to find the right bra, and lots of us go through our life and never, it's like the Holy Grail, particularly for bigger busted women. So Serena Williams has kind of spoken out about being a bigger busted athlete and spending years not having a bra that suited her breast size, her sport. And then when she found it in Australia, before we had things like Amazon and internet mailing. And so she bought 50 of these, she's Serena, she bought 50 of these bras. Most of us have one bra for like 12 years, but she had 50 every year from this one brand because she found her bra. So we need help and we're not getting it. And only 24% of the players chose their sports bra based on its ability to reduce breast movement. That's what it's meant to be doing. So again, without education, we're choosing it on what it looks like, what brand it is, what the straps look like. Because my friend had it, because the sponsors have given us it in the kit bag, and we need to do better. You will have heard lots around the white shorts stuff, because I know that some clubs have been really proactive in changing white shorts to blue and black. But it's the real deal, right? So lots of people are like, oh God, changing kit is really annoying because there's contracts and there's tenders and there's tradition. We have always been red, white, red. We've always been blue, white, blue. How can you now say you want to be blue, blue, blue? Or people freak out about this stuff in football. I've learned. But the point is that if you are an athlete having 5 days of bleeding every month, the 8 months or however long your season is, that's a lot of time you're on a pitch going, am I leaking? Am I leaking? Am I leaking? And you don't want your players to be thinking that. So why not just remove that as something that's sticking around their heads that they can focus on the game in front of them? Interestingly, for the clubs who had changed, the players were like, it was brilliant. you wouldn't believe how emotional they were about it, actually, because they felt like, A, they'd been validated, and B, they felt like they belonged there, because suddenly something was being given to them as female players and not as footballers. And then the goalie would be like, yeah, but I'm still wearing yellow shorts, and the only people behind me are the crowd. So I'm standing there like this. Like, so, you know, we need to continue to have conversations with all the players about whether the kit works for them. Got to the start, said, I'm the only person I know in my friendship group who has to go to work in men's clothes as a woman, and I don't have a choice. And when you say it like that, you think, God, yeah, that does sound weird, doesn't it? Because the staff are being provided the jumpsuit, which looks amazing, but it's making men's bodies. And there's nothing like saying you don't belong here than going, here's your kit. It's not made for you, by the way, but crack on. And that's what those players would say about if they got given male shorts, male shirts. It's just a sign that we prioritise the guys, and you can have some too, but it's not made for you. And the trouble with male kit isn't just because it's not made for women. Women's bodies tend to be a different shape. So we have wider hips because we have babies, if we want to, but our skeletons and our anatomy and where we deposit fat is different. So we have curvier shapes down here. Men are straighter, so men's cut shorts are straight. What tends to happen when girls put on men's or boys' shorts is they go, oh, my legs are really big. Oh, God, I must be really fat. They don't think these shorts are not made for me and my body. They think my body is wrong. So again, it's just playing into a narrative that we want to try and change. All of the players that we interviewed in the project were wearing boots that were made for boys or men. Which is bonkers because, not because it's bonkers, because they should be wearing women's boots, but the amount of science and technology that goes into football boots now is incredible. And that is all wasted when you put it on a female, because these boots were moulded on male feet, which are a different shape, a different size than female feet. They also have loads of different stuff going on northwards of them. So all of the power and load that's going through the foot is created by a more muscular body, a taller body, a body with longer limbs, a body with muscle mass that's distributed differently in a man than in a woman. So you create a really scientific boot that's designed for this person, and you expect it to work for this other person. And actually what it does is it increases injury risk, because if you've got a heavier, stronger, faster person, you need to hold them to the ground more. It takes a lot more. So we make boots that are stiff with studs that hold men's bodies down. Socks, yes. Were you in charge of the Twitter feed? No, there was a brilliant Twitter feed about socks on Instagram. Yes. Feet. No. Feet. The heels up here. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. No, please. It's brilliant. It's just, you know, the list gets longer and longer. And so in athletes, we're trying to stop having ACL injuries because it is, you know, fairly prevalent in women's football. They're in boots that are holding them to the ground, and then they go and turn, they get stuck. They're more likely to have an injury. And then someone was like, I'm sure this person's wearing female boots. Look, we were looking the other day, and yes, brands do have female ranges of boots. The only reason they're called women's boots is because they go down to a size 3, not starting at size 6. They have not been created on women's feet. There are a couple of brands starting to do that R&D now. Bonkers. Anyway, pelvic floors is something we never talk about in sport, because we think about pelvic floor and urinary stress incontinence as a mum thing, as an old lady thing. And yes, the prevalence of dysfunction is high in those groups. Actually, some really worrying research that's come out in the last sort of 4 or 5 years is that young, fit athletes are as likely to have pelvic floor dysfunction as postnatal women. That's scary, for totally different reasons, usually. When we train athletes, we train them to hold, grip, stay strong. We teach them to lift and tense the core so that they can maintain this load. And they like being switched on, and also because they're women, they like to hold their tummies in. And they forget that they have to relax sometimes. And so what happens is their pelvic floor gets overactivated. And so then when they land from a jump, that sounded like a jump there, whoosh through the wind. That momentary force through their body, through a pelvic floor that's just holding on for dear life, suddenly it gives way and they leak. And the prevalence in game sports has been shown to be up to 40% of athletes who are leaking during training or competition and not telling anyone about it because it's embarrassing, and anything to do with wee or poo is just like, oh gosh, just don't mention it. And in this particular study, 20% of the athletes, the players that we surveyed, said they were leaking, and 75% of them did nothing about it. Now, it's a sign of dysfunction, as you can imagine. And it's not just that, oh gosh, they're gonna get wet. It's that if you've got an overactive pelvic floor, you can have hip issues, you can have lower back issues, you can start to get bladder and bowel issues, because instead of going to the loo and relaxing your pelvic floor and letting the things come out, you don't. So you don't fully empty your bladder, you don't fully empty your bowel, you start to get constipation or urinary tract infections. So again, this duty of care, like if we're not talking about what's normal and what's not with women's bodies, and we don't look for the early signs that say, actually, we could help you, then players could go down this route of starting to fall apart a little bit. And very few of them do pelvic floor exercises regularly because they don't think they need to, because they're like, oh, that's for when I'm 45 and slightly older. And then all of this stuff, all of these very specific topics, sorry, it's a bit blurry, like breast support, like the menstrual cycle, like the pelvic floor, were important in an ecosystem that was the thing that allowed players to either feel like they could bring this stuff to the table or keep it hidden away. And those things were how open their coaching and science and medicine staff were, how confident the players were in them to not go, oh God, she's talking about periods, what do I do now? We had some coaches who was like, oh well, no one's ever so exposed to the art period, so I don't think I have a problem here. And I was like, and I don't think the problem is you don't have a problem with periods. I think it's the problem that no one's spoken to you about it. The idea that some of these topics are embarrassing, and there is definitely boundaries. We can't suddenly unleash this idea that coaches are going to go, can I come talk to you about your breast support? As soon as, a male coach says to a young female, can I talk to you about your breast? Like, you can imagine the alarm bells that are going off in everyone's head in terms of safeguarding. And I say it flippantly, but it's so important that when we are thinking about changing this circle and improving that, we have to help coaches with those things. How do I improve my confidence? How do I improve my knowledge? How do I know the boundaries and the scope of my role to talk about periods or bras? There was lots of chat from the players about the equity of resources in the women's and men's game. That won't be new to you. We had players who have been injured for 8 months, and there was an MRI scan on the other side of that window. They could see, but they couldn't touch. When finally it was negotiated that they could get in there, they had a pathway of rehabilitation that fixed them. They were like, I've sat here for 8 months just looking through the window. And so there's this idea that actually, should we be able to share resources so that we're all healthy athletes? So the report then came to a conclusion. It's a hefty report, by the way. I've got really carried away writing it. I was very excited with all that we found. But then it came to some conclusions, which were really our recommendations to the FA. They weren't like, this is what's going to happen, this is not what you have to do. But what we recognised was that there was pockets of really good practice. There was people who were trying to do really brilliant things. But there were also clubs where someone had tried to do brilliant things, and then that person had left, and then everything had gone quiet. And what this area needs, just like mental health has needed in the past, and just like player care will need more generally, is someone who is accountable for it, and someone who is going to be in the club, or the region, or whatever, saying, what are we all doing? And what's the strategy? And where's the consistency? And where's the efficiency here? And that requires leadership and strategy around it. It also requires development of everybody. If you are a qualified football coach, even at the highest level, no one will have ever taught you about periods in sport, hormones to do with the menstrual cycle, sports bras, nothing. We need to also, these are the players' bodies. So there's a real role here for them to be accountable for understanding them. Understanding your menstrual cycle is the first step to being able to then talk to someone about it. So how can we also upskill and up-educate the players so that they have the knowledge they need about their bodies, so they can be held accountable for showing up and saying, okay, well, this is going well, but this isn't. And WSL and WC are a broad church when it comes to the resources available and the size of the science and medicine teams, etc. And for me, there are just some areas where it's a non-negotiable that we need to give everyone the opportunity to have guidelines of best practice. Say, for example, around underfueling and that, stopping the players going down that pathway of breakthrough, returning from having a baby or training while pregnant. These are areas where actually it would be much more efficient rather than saying to every club, you create your own guidelines, that we centralise this stuff to give everyone sort of a level playing field. And then if they want to sparkle it up and do some cool stuff with all their money, they can, but everyone's working from a minimum standard which keeps players safe and well. And then I always like to imagine what we could do if we wanted to pioneer and we wanted to be better than the rest of the world. And these are the sorts of things that we would need to be doing to have that. So we would need people who are accountable for female athlete health in the game, saying, right, all of you people, not I'm the only one the players are going to come and speak to about periods, but what is everyone's role here? And what is the club's role? And what is the club's strategy? Educating everyone, I've already been on about that. Educating the players, so football hours is my name for educating the players, centralising resources, ensuring that from grassroots right to St George's Park, we are doing good things consistently, efficiently, and those are conversations that, again, we're really delighted that the FA is having. How can we join up these two ends? Because what we want in the elite game in a few years is that players arrive in the elite game with really high expectations of how things should operate. And we can only do that by working with the girls who are just at the start of that journey. And then making sure we have in this country the experts we need, but we also know who they are and how to signpost players to them. I actually weren't going through that. Thank you for listening. We've got a few minutes for questions if anyone has them. And then Andy and I will stick around at the end if you want to nab us. Yes.
Thank you for that. I think it was amazing, and I think it really touched on some important things. I'm operations manager for Brighton Hove Wellbeing and Skills Academy. We do a lot of good
Your
stuff.
hubs were amazing in our project, by the way.
Fantastic.
We had the 21s, we had the 8s, we had lots of brilliant Brighton.
We do lots of good things. We give the girls sports bras. We changed our short colour to blue so that they weren't wearing white anymore. We have a lot of nutrition support. I was wondering, the question I have, I suppose, is that as the girls move through their careers, they obviously come to us at under 12, so they're 11 years old, often starting their periods, often going through growth spurts, lots of body changes, that kind of thing. And what we're finding is we can give them all the support they need, but their parents and carers are the gatekeepers for their nutrition, for how comfortable they are talking about periods, for how comfortable they are talking about breast health and breast care. And I was just wondering if there would be some way to almost extend this information out to academy parents and carers, because I think that by the time the girls get to 16 and moving into 21 as football and then also to senior football, their habits are set and their uncomfortableness with talking about things is set, and their lack of knowledge about nutrition, despite our best efforts, is set. And I think sometimes it's because parents and carers don't have the knowledge, they don't have the confidence to speak about what the girls should be eating, talk to them about their periods, the normalising of those conversations. And I just wondered if there would be some way to extend this out to parents and carers, not just in high performance centres like Brighton, but also maybe grassroots clubs. The FA obviously has a massive network of those, and just trying to support those girls into making everything seem normal. Because I think at the moment they come to us and we mention their periods, they're all kind of like, oh my God, no, don't talk about that, because no one's ever spoken to us normally about our periods or about our breasts or about the food we eat. And it's something that,
Yeah, 100%. You mentioned two things there. One is parents and carers. and they are vital. So we do a lot of work in schools and a lot of sports schools. And the first thing we ask them is, we cannot come in and speak to your girls unless we speak to parents. Because they'll just go home and they'll say, oh, that's a really cool talk, Dad, it was about periods. And then everyone will leave the room and they'll be like, okay, so we don't talk about it. So you're absolutely right. They are key. And not just because they do buy the food, they do, but they are also the people who are influencing the mindset. So if mum says, oh, here you go, you can have some hatred pudding because you did 2 training sessions today, we are then feeding a narrative that you have to exercise and get permission to have food. And we're really good at that as sort of an older generation of women, because that's what we. So yeah, all of those things, if we can just sort of hold the mirror up to parents in a really nurturing way and say, how can we help you support this brilliant girl so that she has a healthy relationship with her body for the rest of her life, and then if she wants to excel at sports. So I completely agree, and that habits bit is really important. Everything we do at 11 and 12, so like tracking cycles, is fairly useless when you're 12. Your cycles are all over the place, but it's about getting good habits in place, the eating stuff, getting them to be organised around food. It's about habits rather than expecting them to be absolutely perfecting it at that age. So yeah, I completely agree. And Julie noted.
Just a question about your survey, and I don't know if you researched it. You noticed that players who were injured show more trait of being under eating, so under fuel, as you said, or it's just a trend in general that because of this concept about they tend to eat less and then have.
Yeah, we weren't able to make that connection, and mainly because there's a big injury surveillance survey going on. So we will really like touch on injury in our survey because the medical part of Andy's team are doing a big injury surveillance. But we do know that underfueling is a huge risk factor in injury. So that's why we mustn't get too obsessed with the fact that hormones might be increasing injury risk when actually we've got a whole load of girls over here whose lack of hormones are increasing their injury risk. So yeah, the relationship here is really, really important, but we didn't manage to tease that out in that survey.
Obviously, a lot of these statistics coming from like the higher end of football. In a grassroots environment, obviously, you're not going to have access to like nutritionists and obviously getting access to sports bras and special fitness. What can you obviously incorporate at grassroots level to try and start that help a little bit? Obviously, without the funding and the personnel.
Yeah.
Into that.
No, it's a brilliant question, and we are actually working with Alice and her team at grassroots because a lot of it is education, and I'm biased because that's what I do. But I really think that if a girl understands and her parents understand the need for a really good sports bra, but they know that they don't have to go and buy an £80 sports bra. They can go to Decathlon and buy an £8 sports bra. But the important thing is that it fits and it's the right one for them. Well, what is the right one for me? Oh, well, here's the information. And then the question is, how do we make the information engaging enough for those people? Because just putting it up on a document on a web page sometimes doesn't cut it, particularly for young people. So I absolutely agree that we need to get this information further down the pathway, and I think it's all absolutely doable. Because we don't need to over-engineer it. We need to make things simple so that people can pick up what to do, the healthy habits from it early on. So I don't think there's a huge difference between what we need to provide for elites and grassroots. It's just how we have to deliver it. So we can't provide everyone with a sports bra that's made bespoke or fitted professionally, but we can give everyone the information about how to get closer to having a brilliant sports bra. Yeah.
My sort of question, but I just wanted to go off of that. I work for business management with Truth Community, and we run a webinar on supporting players through their periods and saying that parents, carers, guardians, but also coaches and club staff, and that's free and available online. So it's on our menstrual cycle page. That's something you can share with the grassroots community, and in there on that page we have loads of resources and connections to period companies, but also resources for coaches that's all free and accessible. And on there includes a Q&A on the webinar, they included all of that, so there might be some questions that coaches and grassroots or parents might have as well. So just making that information accessible.
Thank you, and that's a good example of really good work done by the regional S16. Thank you.
Do you find that there's either like different or additional like training machines or devices or whatnot that would well, then would be anything about well, like aside from this building a new facility or a suite. That was like a co-ed.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think some of the biggest gaps in terms of provision for women aren't necessarily the equipment, but it's that it's designed for the average male hand, for example, or the length of a barbell. Or so it's kind of thinking about who has this been designed for, and is there a version of where they've considered that the person picking this weight up or on this machine is the dimensions of a woman, because, as I said, limb length, muscle distribution is all different, and that affects how we might operate and get the most out of certain machinery and fitness equipment. So, and also for me, it's the environment and how we build the environment. So, lots of schools we go to unveil a lovely swimming pool, and it's like this glass side, and we're like, your girls are really struggling to put a swimsuit on at the moment, and then you're parading them, and then the car park is outside. And they're like, oh no, we didn't think of that. So it's like how we build the environment, and the pictures we put on the wall, the toilet facilities, everything contributes to how the girls feel. Yes.
And first, thank you. It's a great piece of work. I just had a question from your experience. What does sort of gold standard look like in team environment when you're individualising your training prescription based upon what phase of a menstrual cycle an athlete might be in?
So I'm quite old-fashioned in that I don't think it's possible to, in football, in any team environment, train people synced to their menstrual cycle physiology. So first, we've got 3 minutes left, and I'm going to fill in with this information. So first of all, we know that the physiology of the menstrual cycle doesn't fundamentally affect performance. So strength, power, speed, running economy is not impacted across the cycle. So a player can show up and be as fast on any given day. The thing that will stop them being as fast is symptoms. So if you, boring geeky fact, progesterone's in your brain and it's making you slightly less coordinated, you might not run as fast because your motor control is slightly affected. The question is not, the statement is not, oh dear, she can't run as fast in one day. It's, what do we do to prepare her to overcome the symptoms that her menstrual cycle is throwing at her so that she can run fast on any given day? The training bit, we have some evidence that doing some types of training, your physiology might be better suited to them in different phases. But the noise that would create, in my opinion, to say, girls who are in week 2, come over here, we're going to do an extra set of lifts. And girls who are in week 4, we're actually going to back off the speed and agility today. Like that, the noise it would create would just far outweigh the benefits you get of just training everyone in a way that works. So my version of that is that, could we have a group of women in front of us who we know show up to us as coaches every day, knowing what they've got to do to get the best out of themselves? And so for some people, it might be what they're eating, their hydration. For some people, it might be doing a yoga workout before they start because they know that helps with period pain or low energy. It might be changing their diet. It might be taking some medication, whatever it is, so that they can show up in front of you and say, I'm not really being influenced by my menstrual cycle today, but I've done a shitload of work to find out what I need to do to show up like this. That, I think if we got there, that would be amazing. And I think there are things you can do to flex your training, but I think best practice would have to be really flexible and individual, and just having that sort of approach where we're going to train everyone depending on where they are in their cycle, for me, is noisy and disruptive rather than helpful. I think we're going to finish there. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, guys.